What would you do if the woman your husband was sleeping with crashed your baby shower? You'd probably scream, cry, maybe even throw a punch. But for Olivia, the chaos was just the beginning. As her world shattered in a storm of pastel decorations and hushed whispers, one person in the room remained perfectly calm: her grandmother, Carol. And when the time came, Grandma Carol didn't offer a comforting hug or a shoulder to cry on. Instead, she handed over a single, elegantly wrapped gift that wasn't for the baby. It was for her cheating son-in-law. What was inside that box didn't just end the affair. It detonated a lifetime of lies and left the mistress utterly speechless. The late August sun streamed through the expansive bay windows of the house on Sycamore Lane, illuminating dancing dust motes in golden shafts of light. It was the kind of perfect, honey-drenched light that photographers dream of, the kind that makes everything it touches seem pristine and whole. Olivia basked in it, one hand resting protectively on the taut drum of her belly, feeling the gentle flutter of her daughter-to-be. The house itself was a testament to a life meticulously built, a life she believed was as solid and beautifully designed as the reclaimed oak floors beneath her feet. Her husband, Mark, was an architect, and this house was his masterpiece, his gift to her when they found out she was pregnant. He had called it their forever home. Every line was clean, every window perfectly placed to catch the morning or evening light. He designed the nursery himself, a serene space painted in a soft, muted sage, with a mural of a whimsical forest on one wall. Mark was a man of details, of grand gestures and precise execution. He was successful, handsome, the kind of man whose confident smile could calm any storm, or so she thought. Lately, the storms had been brewing just under the surface. Tiny, almost imperceptible shifts in their shared atmosphere. The late nights at the office became more frequent, attributed to a demanding new project downtown, a skyscraper that was set to be the jewel in his firm's crown. The texts he sent during the day grew shorter, the loving emojis replaced with perfunctory okays and on my way. When she'd try to broach the subject, gently probing if he was stressed or overwhelmed, he'd flash that brilliant, disarming smile. "Just pushing to get this done before our little girl arrives, Liv," he'd said just last week, kissing her forehead. "I want to be able to take a whole month off, completely unplugged, just the three of us." The promise was so beautiful, so exactly what she wanted to hear, that she pushed her anxieties down, chalking them up to third trimester hormones. Every pregnant woman felt insecure, didn't she? It was a cliché for a reason. So she focused on the baby shower. Her sister, Sophie, had taken the lead, a whirlwind of energy and organizational prowess. The theme was a storybook beginning. Guests were asked to bring their favorite children's book to start the baby's library. Tiny sandwiches were cut into stars and moons. The punch was a sparkling pink, and a 3-tiered cake decorated with characters from classic tales served as the centerpiece on the dining room table. The whole house smelled of sugar, vanilla, and the heady scent of the peonies her mother, Helen, had brought from her garden. Friends and family filled the space with warmth and laughter. Her colleagues from the art gallery where she worked as a curator brought thoughtful, creative gifts. Mark's mother, Barbara, a woman who always seemed to carry an air of detached judgment, even managed a thin, approving smile as she handed Olivia a box containing an antique silver rattle that had been in their family for generations. And then there was her grandmother, Carol. At 82, Carol was the undisputed matriarch of the family. A former high school principal, she possessed a quiet, observant intelligence that missed nothing. She didn't speak often, but when she did, Her words carried weight. She sat in a comfortable armchair by the fireplace, her silver hair styled in a neat coif, her posture impeccable. She hadn't brought a gift for the baby. Instead, a single, medium-sized box wrapped in plain, heavy navy blue paper sat at her feet. It was conspicuously different from the pastel-hued mountain of presents piling up on the designated gift table. When Olivia had asked her about it earlier, Carol had simply patted her hand. "This one is for a different occasion, dear," she'd said, her eyes holding a look Olivia couldn't quite decipher. Patience. Mark was playing the part of the doting father-to-be to perfection. He mingled effortlessly, his hand frequently finding the small of Olivia's back, his voice booming with pride as he showed off the nursery he'd designed. He had to leave for a bit, he'd explained apologetically. A quick, unavoidable meeting with a contractor on site at the new building. "It's Saturday, Mark," Olivia had whispered, a flicker of disappointment passing through her. "I know, baby, I'm so sorry. I promise I'll be back before you open the big gifts." "I wouldn't miss that for the world," he'd promised, sealing it with a kiss that felt both public and performative. She watched him leave, the sleek lines of his silver Audi disappearing down the sun-dappled street. A tiny cold knot formed in her stomach, an unwelcome guest at the otherwise joyful party. Sophie, ever perceptive, appeared at her side with a glass of pink lemonade. "Don't you worry about him," she said, her voice a low, fierce whisper. "Today is about you and my little niece. He can deal with his concrete and steel some other day." Olivia smiled, grateful for her sister's unwavering loyalty. She took a sip of the sweet, bubbly drink and let the warmth of the room wash over her, pushing the cold knot down, burying it under layers of laughter, friendship, and the promise of a new life. She smoothed her hands over her dress, a flowing periwinkle blue that matched the color of the hydrangeas on the mantel. Everything was perfect. The sun was shining. Her baby was safe and sound inside her. The lie was still intact, sun-drenched and beautiful, and for a few more precious moments, she was allowed to live within it. The party was in full swing, the initial buzz of arrivals settling into a comfortable, happy hum. Laughter echoed from the living room as one of Olivia's cousins told an animated story. In the kitchen, her mother and aunts debated the merits of various sleep-training methods. Olivia sat on the plush sofa, a fortress of pillows tucked behind her back, feeling like a queen reigning over her happy kingdom. She ran her fingers over the embossed cover of a first-edition copy of Goodnight Moon, a gift from an old college friend. The doorbell rang, a sharp, intrusive chime that cut through the gentle noise of the party. Sophie, who was collecting empty plates, frowned. "Is someone late? I thought everyone was here." She set the plates down and headed for the door. Olivia craned her neck, expecting to see a smiling, apologetic friend holding a gift bag. Instead, she saw Sophie's body stiffen in the entryway. The welcoming smile on her face vanished, replaced by a mask of cold disbelief. Sophie didn't step aside to let the person in. She blocked the doorway, a silent, formidable guard. A voice, crisp and confident, sliced through the air. "I'm here for the party. For Mark and Olivia." The voice was unfamiliar. A woman stood on the threshold, and she was the stark antithesis of the soft, celebratory atmosphere inside. She wore a tailored crimson dress that was more suited for a boardroom or a cocktail bar than a sunny afternoon baby shower. Her heels were impossibly high, her dark hair pulled back in a severe glossy ponytail. She held a single, long-stemmed white lily in one hand, a flower more commonly associated with funerals than births. Silence rippled outwards from the door as guests began to notice the standoff. Conversations faltered. The happy hum died, replaced by a tense, expectant quiet. "I'm sorry. I think you have the wrong house," Sophie said, her voice dangerously low. The woman laughed, a short, sharp sound devoid of any real humor. "Oh, I have the right house. This is Mark's masterpiece, isn't it? He's told me all about it." She craned her neck, her sharp eyes scanning the interior, taking in the decorations, the guests, and finally settling on Olivia. A slow, predatory smile spread across her perfectly painted red lips. "There she is." She pushed past a stunned Sophie and walked into the living room as if she owned it. The air crackled. Every eye in the room was fixed on her. She walked directly towards the center of the room, her heels clicking an aggressive rhythm on the oak floors. "Olivia," she said, her voice resonating with an unnerving familiarity. "I'm Jessica. I work with Mark. He talks about you all the time." The name, Jessica, pricked at Olivia's memory. It was a name she'd seen on late-night texts on Mark's phone, a name he'd brushed off as just my project manager, coordinating things. The knot in Olivia's stomach from earlier returned, coiling into a venomous snake. Her mother, Helen, stepped forward, her face a mixture of confusion and maternal defensiveness. "This is a private party. I think you should leave." Jessica ignored her completely. Her gaze was locked on Olivia. "I just had to come. A baby. It's such a momentous occasion. I couldn't let it pass without offering my congratulations in person." She extended the white lily. "For you." Olivia stared at the flower, its waxy petals seeming to mock the joyful peonies and roses that filled the room. Her hand, which had been resting on her belly, felt cold. This woman wasn't a colleague. A colleague didn't show up uninvited to a baby shower dressed for combat. A colleague didn't look at the pregnant wife of her boss with an expression that was a toxic cocktail of pity and triumph. "Who are you?" Olivia's voice was barely a whisper, but in the dead silent room it sounded like a shout. "I told you," Jessica said, her smile widening. "I'm Mark's colleague, his very, very close colleague." She let the words hang in the air, each one a drop of poison. "We spend a lot of time together. Long nights, early mornings. You know how demanding that skyscraper project is." The implication was thick and suffocating. The room felt suddenly hot, the air too thin to breathe. Sophie moved to Olivia's side, her hand gripping her sister's shoulder. "Get out," Sophie hissed at Jessica, her eyes blazing. "Get out of my sister's house, right now!" Jessica's composure finally cracked, just a little. A flicker of something raw and desperate showed in her eyes. This wasn't just a power play. It was an act of a woman who felt she had a claim to stake. "This isn't just her house," Jessica retorted, her voice rising. "This is Mark's house too. And Mark and I have a life that you people know nothing about. A real life. Not this storybook charade." She gestured around the room, at the pastel decorations and the smiling faces that were now frozen in shock and horror. The storybook beginning theme suddenly felt like a cruel joke. Across the room, Olivia saw her grandmother, Carol, while everyone else was staring at Jessica. Carol's gaze was fixed on Olivia. Her expression wasn't one of shock or anger. It was one of profound, heart-breaking validation, as if a suspicion she had long harbored had just been confirmed in the most brutal way possible. She gave a slow, almost imperceptible nod. Not to Olivia, but to herself. The gears were turning behind her clear, intelligent eyes. The spell of silence broke. Mark's mother, Barbara, let out a scandalized gasp. Olivia's friends began whispering furiously, but it was Jessica's next words that shattered the fragile remnants of Olivia's world. "He was with me last night, Olivia," Jessica announced, her voice ringing with vindictive clarity. And the night before that, he tells me he loves me. He tells me he feels trapped here. He was supposed to leave you after the baby was born. But I'm tired of waiting. The venomous snake in Olivia's stomach struck. The room tilted violently, the sun-drenched light splintering into a million painful shards. The faces of her friends and family blurred into a watercolor wash of pity and disgust. The only thing in focus was this woman, this stranger who had walked into her home and casually detonated her life. The lie was no longer sun-drenched. It was exposed, ugly, and crawling in the light. The world narrowed to a roaring in Olivia's ears. Jessica's words echoed in the sudden, cavernous silence of the room. He was with me last night. Tired of waiting. Supposed to leave you. Each phrase was a physical blow, knocking the air from her lungs, making her feel as though the floor had dropped out from beneath her. She gripped the arm of the sofa, her knuckles white, her body trembling. This couldn't be real. It was a nightmare, a fever dream brought on by too much sugar and the oppressive August heat. But Jessica was still there, standing defiant in her blood-red dress, a smug, self-righteous glint in her eyes. She was real. The pain was real. Sophie recovered first, her shock morphing into pure, unadulterated rage. She took a step towards Jessica, her hands clenched into fists. You have 5 seconds to get out of here before I physically throw you out onto the lawn. Try it, Jessica sneered, not backing down an inch. I think Mark would be very interested to hear how his family treats me, the mother of his other child. A collective gasp swept through the room. The air was sucked out of the space, leaving a vacuum of pure shock. Other child. The words were impossible. Monstrous. Olivia's hand flew to her own belly, a desperate, instinctual gesture of protection. You're lying, Olivia whispered, the words catching in her throat. Mark, her Mark, the man who had cried when he first heard their daughter's heartbeat, the man who spent hours assembling a crib because he wanted it to be perfect. He couldn't be this person. He couldn't be this monster. Jessica's expression softened into one of faux sympathy. Am I? Ask him. Oh, wait. You can't. He's not here, is he? He's probably on his way to see me, thinking I'm waiting for him at our apartment. She savoured the word. Our apartment. The one he pays for. The one where he doesn't have to pretend. The meticulously constructed facade of Olivia's life was not just cracking. It was being systematically sledgehammered into dust. The late nights, the short texts, the business trips, every little lie she had swallowed, every doubt she had suppressed, rushed back with the force of a tidal wave. She felt foolish, naive, a child who had believed in a fairy tale while living in a house of cards. That's enough. Her mother's voice was sharp, cutting through the haze of Olivia's disbelief. Helen moved to stand between Olivia and Jessica, a mother lion protecting her wounded cub. Whatever business you think you have here, it's over. This is a celebration of new life, and you are not welcome. This is about a new life, all right, Jessica said, her voice dripping with meaning. She placed a hand on her own flat stomach. I'm not pregnant yet, but we've been trying. Mark wants a son. The cruelty was breathtaking. To say such a thing in this room, on this day, was an act of psychological warfare. It was designed to inflict the maximum possible pain, to not only destroy the present, but to poison the future as well. It was at that moment that the front door opened again, and this time it was Mark. He walked in, a smile on his face, holding a small, gift-wrapped box. Sorry I'm late, the traffic was... He stopped dead. His eyes widened as he took in the scene, the silent, staring guests. Sophie, who looked ready for murder. His mother, pale with shock. Olivia, her face ashen and streaked with silent tears, and in the center of it all, Jessica, standing like a vengeful statue. The color drained from his face. Panic, raw and undisguised, flashed in his eyes. He looked like a cornered animal. "Jessica," he choked out. "What are you doing here?" "I was just congratulating your wife," Jessica said, her tone saccharine sweet. "We were all getting acquainted." Mark's eyes darted around the room, frantically trying to assess the damage. He took a step towards Olivia, his hands outstretched. "Liv, honey, this is not what it looks like. She's unwell. She's been obsessed with me for months. This is all just a fantasy." The lie was so bald, so pathetic, that it was almost laughable. After everything Jessica had said, this was his defense, that she was a deranged stalker? Olivia finally found her voice, and when it came, it was filled with a cold, brittle fury she didn't know she possessed. "She said you were with her last night, Mark." "No, I was at the office. I told you, this new project is—" "I called your office at midnight," Sophie shouted, her voice shaking with rage. "I had a question about the gift registry. The night security guard said no one from your team had been in the building since 6 p.m. Where were you, Mark?" He flinched as if he'd been struck. His eyes flickered towards Jessica, a silent, panicked communication passing between them. That single glance was all the confirmation anyone needed. The whole room saw it. The betrayal was complete, undeniable, and playing out under the cheerful "A Storybook Beginning" banner that was still hanging, mockingly, over the fireplace. Mark's composure crumbled. The charming, confident architect dissolved, revealing a weak, deceitful man beneath. "Olivia, we can talk about this later," he pleaded, his voice cracking. "Please, not here. Not now." "There is no later for us, Mark," Olivia said, the finality in her own voice surprising her. The pain was still a raging inferno inside her, but through it a strange, chilling clarity was emerging. "She said you have an apartment together. She said you want a son with her." Mark stared at her, his mouth opening and closing, but no words came out. He was exposed, stripped bare of all his lies in front of her friends, her family, his own mother. Jessica, seeing her victory, stepped forward to deliver the final blow. "Tell her, Mark. Tell her about our plans. Tell her how you were going to leave her and this perfect little house after the baby was born, because you didn't want the divorce to get messy while she was pregnant. Tell her the truth, for once in your life." Mark looked at Olivia, his face a mask of desperation and shame. His silence was the loudest confession of all. It was all true. Everything. The unraveling was complete. The storybook had been slammed shut, its pages ripped out and set on fire. And Olivia was left standing in the ashes. While the chaos erupted, one person remained an island of preternatural calm. Grandma Carol had not moved from her armchair by the fireplace. She had not gasped. She had not spoken. She had not shed a tear. While her daughter Helen was trying to shield Olivia, and her granddaughter Sophie was vibrating with a desire to commit violence, Carol simply watched. Her silence was not one of weakness or shock. It was the heavy, weighted silence of a judge observing courtroom proceedings. Her hands, wrinkled with age but still steady, rested on the arms of the chair. Her gaze, sharp and discerning behind her gold-rimmed glasses, moved from face to face, absorbing every detail, every lie, every flicker of guilt and pain. She watched Mark as he stumbled through his pathetic denials, noting the sweat on his brow and the way his eyes couldn't meet his wife's. She saw the desperation in his attempts to paint Jessica as delusional, a flimsy defense that crumbled under the barest scrutiny. Her eyes held a flicker of contempt. She had never been fully convinced by Mark's polished charm. She had seen a core of selfishness in him from the beginning, a weakness for adoration that she knew could curdle into deceit. She had hoped for Olivia's sake that she was wrong, but she had never let go of her reservations. She watched Jessica, this uninvited harbinger of destruction. She saw the vindictive triumph in the younger woman's face, but she also saw the desperation beneath it. This was not the act of a woman secure in her position. It was the last, desperate gamble of someone who had been fed promises and was terrified of being left with nothing. Jessica thought she was holding all the cards, that by exposing the affair she would win the prize. Carol knew better. A man who would lie so comprehensively to his pregnant wife would certainly lie to his mistress. Jessica was not a victor. She was just another victim of Mark's corrosive weakness, a pawn in a game she was about to lose spectacularly. Most of all, she watched her granddaughter, Olivia. She saw the initial, blinding shock, the crumbling of her world, the visceral pain that made her want to reach out and pull Olivia into her arms. But she held back. She saw something else beginning to emerge through the heartbreak, a flicker of steel. It was the same resilience she had seen in Olivia's mother after her father passed away too young. It was the family backbone, the quiet strength that had seen their women through wars, depressions, and personal tragedies for generations. It was dormant in Olivia, buried under years of comfort and love. But it was there. Carol knew that this moment, as horrific as it was, would be the crucible that forged it into something unbreakable. The guests were paralyzed, unsure of what to do. Some looked at the floor in embarrassment. Others whispered to their neighbors. The party was dead, the air thick with the stench of betrayal. Mark was now pleading with Olivia in a low, desperate voice, trying to pull her into the hallway for a private conversation. But Olivia stood her ground, unmoving, her arms wrapped around her belly. "There's nothing to talk about, Mark," Olivia said, her voice hollow. "You've made your choices. Now you just need to leave." "Liv, please don't do this," he begged, his voice cracking. "Think about the baby, our family. You thought about our baby when you were with her?" The question was quiet, but it landed with the force of a physical blow. Mark had no answer. It was into this fraught, painful stalemate that Carol finally chose to act. She didn't stand up and shout. She didn't deliver a grand, scolding speech. She simply cleared her throat. The sound was soft, but in the tense silence, it cut through the room like a judge's gavel. Every head turned towards the old woman in the armchair. "Mark," she said, her voice calm and steady, devoid of any apparent emotion. "Before you go, I believe it's time for me to give my gift." The statement was so bizarre, so out of place in the context of the shattered afternoon, that everyone was momentarily stunned into silence. Gifts. Now? Mark stared at her, bewildered. "Carol, I don't think this is the time." "Oh, I think it's the perfect time," she interrupted, her voice gaining a steely edge. "In fact, I can't imagine a more appropriate moment." She leaned down, her movements deliberate and unhurried, and picked up the box at her feet, the one wrapped in plain, dark blue paper. It looked somber and serious amidst the festive wreckage of the party. Holding the box in her lap, she looked directly at Mark. Her gaze was unflinching, and for the first time, Mark seemed to see the formidable woman beneath the grandmotherly facade. He looked genuinely afraid. "I was going to wait," Carol continued, her voice resonating through the silent room. "I was going to give this to you in private, to give you a chance to do the right thing without this public display. But you, and this young woman here," she gestured dismissively towards Jessica, "have forced my hand." She held the box out. "This gift isn't for the baby, Mark. It's for you. The tension in the room ratcheted up to an unbearable level. What could possibly be in that box? It was too small to be anything overtly threatening, yet the way Carol held it, the look in her eyes, suggested its contents were more explosive than anything Jessica had revealed. Olivia watched her grandmother, a flicker of confusion breaking through her grief. She had never seen her grandmother like this, so commanding, so cold, so utterly in control. It was as if she had been waiting for this exact moment, prepared for a battle Olivia hadn't even known was being waged. The quiet matriarch was about to show them all what it truly meant to protect her family. Mark stared at the navy blue box as if it were a bomb. The entire room seemed to be holding its breath. The air, already thick with betrayal and recrimination, was now charged with a new, powerful current of suspense. What could an 82-year-old woman possibly have in a gift box that could alter the course of this disaster? "I don't want a gift, Carol," Mark said, trying to sound reasonable, but his voice was strained. He was trying to regain control, to de-escalate, to somehow herd this catastrophe back into a private sphere where he could manage it with his usual arsenal of lies and manipulations. "You're mistaken," Carol said, her voice as unyielding as granite. "You need this gift. You need to open it. Right here, right now, in front of everyone you have so profoundly disappointed." She fixed her gaze on him, a silent command that was more powerful than a shout. Slowly, as if in a trance, Mark walked towards her. He took the box from her outstretched hands. It felt heavier than it looked. The paper was thick and expensive, the corners perfectly creased. It was wrapped with a precision that hinted at the importance of its contents. He looked from the box to Olivia, a desperate, silent plea in his eyes. But Olivia's face was a mask of grief. She wasn't going to save him. Her world was in ruins. She had no salvation to offer. He glanced at Jessica, who watched with a smug, curious expression, believing this was just some bizarre, senile tangent that would soon be over, clearing the way for her ultimate victory. She had no idea she was a mere spectator in a drama whose climax had been authored by the quiet old woman in the armchair. With trembling fingers, Mark fumbled with the ribbon. It came undone with a soft hiss. He tore at the paper, his usual suave composure completely gone, replaced by a clumsy, nervous haste. He lifted the lid off the box. The room was so quiet that the faint rustle of tissue paper sounded like a roar. Inside, nestled on a bed of dark grey tissue, was not a watch, or cufflinks, or any other typical gift for a man. It was a handsome, dark green leather folio, embossed with a simple, elegant M.R., his initials, Mark Reynolds. It looked official, expensive, and deeply intimidating. "What is this?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Open it," Carol commanded. He lifted the folio out of the box. The leather was cool and smooth beneath his sweaty palms. He untied the thin leather cord that held it closed and opened it on a nearby coffee table, pushing aside a plate of uneaten cupcakes. The first thing he saw, lying on top, was a single, crisp sheet of paper. It was a copy of the prenuptial agreement he and Olivia had signed a week before their wedding 6 years ago. It had been his idea, a practical measure, he had told her, to protect his growing business assets. Olivia, trusting and in love, had signed it without much fuss after a cursory glance from a lawyer he had recommended. A single paragraph on the second page was highlighted in bright yellow. It was Section 7, Clause B, the Infidelity Clause. Mark's blood ran cold. He remembered the clause vaguely. His own lawyer had called it standard but largely symbolic, rarely enforceable with any real teeth. He had insisted on its inclusion, ironically, as a gesture of his commitment at the time. But underneath the highlighted clause was a small, handwritten note from Carol. It read, "Symbolic clauses are only symbolic if no one bothers to add teeth. My lawyer, Mr. Abernathy, helped me add some. Read the addendum." Panic clawed at his throat. He flipped the page. There it was. Addendum A, an addition he had barely glanced at, dismissing it as legalese. It stipulated, in excruciatingly precise language, that in the event of proven marital infidelity on his part, he would forfeit any and all claim to assets acquired during the marriage that were funded by or derived from any wealth, property, or trusts belonging to Olivia's family. Furthermore, it outlined a penalty clause, a one-time payment of $500,000 from his personal assets to a trust for any children of the marriage, to be executed within 30 days of a divorce filing on grounds of adultery. He had signed it. His signature was right there, a confident, arrogant scrawl from a man who never imagined he would be caught. Jessica, craning her neck to see, let out a small, confused sound. This wasn't the dramatic victory she had envisioned. This was about money, about contracts. It had nothing to do with her and Mark's great love story. "It's just a piece of paper," she said dismissively. "He can fight that." Carol's lips curved into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, can he?" Perhaps he should look at the next item in the folio. Mark's hands were shaking so badly now that he could barely turn the page. Beneath the prenup was a sheaf of papers held together with a clip. It was a neatly compiled financial report. It detailed transactions from a joint savings account, an account Mark had told Olivia was a low-yield real estate investment fund. But it wasn't. The statements showed a monthly rent payment of $5,000 for a luxury apartment in a downtown high-rise. They showed charges from Tiffany & Co. for a diamond tennis bracelet, the very bracelet Jessica was wearing. They showed airline tickets for 2 to the Caribbean, hotel receipts from a boutique hotel in Napa Valley, and a dozen other extravagant expenses, all time-stamped over the past 18 months. It was a meticulous, undeniable record of his secret life, paid for with money Olivia had inherited from her father. Jessica went pale. The triumphant smirk vanished from her face. The bracelet on her wrist suddenly felt like a lead weight. The Our apartment she had so proudly announced was funded by the very woman she had come to humiliate. But Carol wasn't finished. The gift had another layer. "There's more, Mark," she said, her voice soft but laced with ice. "Keep going." Beneath the financial statements was a thick, glossy envelope. Mark opened it with a sense of dread so profound it felt like he was drowning. He slid out a stack of 8x10 photographs. The first few were of him and Jessica, kissing outside the downtown apartment, laughing over dinner at a restaurant he'd told Olivia he was too busy to try. But as he flipped through them, the pictures changed. It wasn't just Jessica. There was another woman, a blonde, leaving a hotel with him during a business conference in Chicago 6 months ago. Another, a brunette, getting into his car late one night a year ago. It was a portfolio of his betrayals. Not just a single affair, but a pattern of deceit. A private investigator's report was attached, detailing dates, times, and locations with chilling accuracy. Jessica stared at the photos of the other women, her face a mask of utter disbelief. The color drained from her cheeks, leaving 2 bright spots of angry red. Her great love story, the foundation upon which she had built her righteous indignation, was a lie. She wasn't his one true love, destined to replace the wife. She was just the latest in a series. She was a fool. The final item in the folio was the most devastating of all. It was a single, official-looking document. The deed to the house. The beautiful house on Sycamore Lane that Mark had designed, his masterpiece, his gift to Olivia. The deed clearly stated that the property had been purchased not with Mark's money, but with funds from a trust established by Olivia's late grandfather. Carol was the trustee. Mark's name was on the deed, but only as a spouse residing in the property. And tucked behind it was another document, already signed by Carol as trustee, and only awaiting Olivia's signature to be executed, a quitclaim deed, transferring the property wholly and solely into Olivia's name. The house wasn't his masterpiece. He was just the architect. The foundation he stood on, both literally and figuratively, belonged to Olivia. He was a guest in his wife's home. The gift was complete. It wasn't a present. It was a judgment. It was a meticulously prepared, legally binding cage that had just sprung shut. The silence in the room was absolute, a crushing weight that seemed to bend the very air. The only sound was the ragged, panicked breathing of Mark Reynolds. He stared at the deed, at the quitclaim form, at the damning evidence of his serial betrayals laid bare on the coffee table for all to see. The leather folio wasn't a gift. It was an indictment, a meticulously crafted weapon that had just severed the arteries of his entire life. Every escape route was closed. Every lie had been exposed, not by a hysterical accusation, but by cold, hard, documented fact. He couldn't claim Jessica was a stalker when there were financial records of their life together. He couldn't claim it was a one-time mistake when there was photographic evidence of other women. He couldn't claim ownership of their life, their home, their future, when the very deed to the house declared him little more than a tenant. He looked up at Carol, his face a mess of sweat and disbelief. "How?" he whispered, the single word a testament to his shattered arrogance. "How did you know?" Carol's expression remained placid, but her eyes were like chips of ice. A man who is careless with his wife's heart is often careless with her money, Mark. I am the trustee of my husband's estate. It is my duty to ensure its assets are protected. I noticed discrepancies in the trust account statements 18 months ago. Small at first, then larger. I didn't want to believe the worst, so I hired a professional to give me the facts. He was very thorough. Her gaze swept over the room, over the stunned faces of friends and family. I did this in silence because I was hoping to protect my granddaughter from this humiliation. I was going to present you with this information in private, Mark. I was going to give you the chance to confess, to leave with a shred of dignity, and to make this right for Olivia and your child without this circus. Her eyes landed on Jessica, who flinched as if struck. But you and your associate decided on a different course of action. You brought the circus to her doorstep. So I brought the truth. Jessica finally found her voice, but it was nothing like the confident, cutting tone she had used before. It was a thin, reedy sound, filled with a dawning, horrified understanding. The apartment, the trips, that was her money, she asked, looking at Mark as if seeing him for the first time. Mark couldn't even look at her. He was staring at Olivia, whose face was a canvas of profound, earth-shattering pain. But underneath it, something new was taking root. The chilling clarity from before was solidifying. She was looking at the contents of the folio, not with the shock of a victim, but with the grim acceptance of a survivor taking stock of the wreckage. The inheritance her grandmother had just given her wasn't the house, or the money, or the legal upper hand. It was the truth. Ugly, brutal, and undeniable. And in that truth there was a strange and terrible freedom. There was nothing left to doubt, nothing left to fear she was imagining. The worst had already happened, and it had been laid out for her in black and white. Jessica took a shaky step back, her mind reeling. She had come here to blow up Olivia's life, to claim her prize. Instead, she had discovered that the prize was a fraud, and she herself was just another line item on a long list of his expenses. The diamond bracelet on her wrist felt like a manacle. The crimson dress felt cheap and tawdry. She had been played more thoroughly than the woman she had come to pity. She was not the empowered other woman. She was a dupe, a fool who had mistaken expensive trinkets for love and empty promises for a future. The speechless one wasn't Olivia anymore. It was her. Without another word, Jessica turned. Her confident stride was gone, replaced by a clumsy, hurried retreat. She nearly tripped in her ridiculous heels as she fled the house, the white lily she had brought lying abandoned and pathetic on the floor. The back of her crimson dress was the last they saw of her before the front door clicked shut behind her. Now, only Mark was left in the center of the silent, watching circle. He was adrift, all his anchors cut. He looked from the folio to Olivia's face, a desperate, last-ditch appeal forming on his lips. "Liv, we can fix this. I can fix this. I love you. I swear, I love you. It was a mistake, all of it." Olivia held up a hand, and the simple gesture stopped him cold. The trembling had ceased. Her voice, when she spoke, was quiet, but it resonated with an authority no one in that room, least of all Mark, had ever heard from her before. "The only thing you are going to fix," she said, her eyes locking onto his, "is a box. To put your things in." She took a deep breath, her hand resting on her belly, on the only pure and true thing left in the ruins of her marriage. "My grandmother gave you your gift, Mark. Now here is mine. You have 1 hour to pack a bag and get out of my house. The rest of your things will be sent to your office. A lawyer will be in contact with you on Monday morning regarding the execution of Addendum A of our prenuptial agreement and the filing for divorce." Each word was precise, deliberate, and utterly final. This was not the heartbroken, naive woman he had married. This was someone new, someone forged in the fire of his betrayal and armed with her grandmother's devastating truth. Mark's mother, Barbara, finally spoke, a horrified whisper. "Olivia, dear, perhaps you shouldn't be so hasty. Think of the baby." Olivia's head snapped towards her mother-in-law. "The baby is the only thing I am thinking of, Barbara. I am thinking about raising my daughter in a home that is not built on a foundation of lies. I am thinking about teaching her that a woman's value is not determined by a man's fidelity. And I am thinking that she will be better off with one honest parent than with two, one of whom is a stranger." She turned her gaze back to Mark. It was cold, clear, and empty of any of the love it had once held for him. "Your hour starts now," she said. And then she turned her back on him, a final, irrevocable act of dismissal. The storybook was over. A new, unwritten one was about to begin. Mark stood frozen for a long moment, the collective gaze of the room pressing down on him. He opened his mouth, then closed it. There was nothing left to say. No lie was grand enough to cover this, no apology deep enough to bridge the chasm that had opened between them. Defeated, he turned and walked stiffly towards the staircase, his footsteps echoing the hollow beat of his own downfall. As soon as he was out of sight, a wave of motion broke the spell in the living room. Sophie rushed to Olivia's side, wrapping her in a fierce hug. Her mother, Helen, was close behind, her face wet with tears as she stroked her daughter's hair. Friends quietly began to clean up, gathering plates of untouched cake and deflating balloons, their hushed movements a respectful effort to restore some semblance of order to the chaos. They offered gentle words of support, squeezed Olivia's arm, and then, understanding the need for family and for privacy, they began to slip away, leaving behind the books they had brought for the baby, a small, silent promise of the new stories yet to come. Mark's mother, Barbara, lingered awkwardly for a moment before approaching Carol. "You knew," she accused, her voice a low hiss. "You knew, and you let this happen." Carol looked up from her armchair, her expression unreadable. "I didn't let anything happen, Barbara. Your son made his choices, over and over again. I simply made sure that when the consequences arrived, they would land on him, not my granddaughter." With a quiet finality, Carol stood up, signaling the conversation was over. Barbara, flushed with anger and shame, turned and left without another word. Soon, only the 4 women remained: Olivia, her sister, her mother, and her grandmother, standing together in the sun-drenched room that was now irrevocably and solely Olivia's. The air was thick with unspoken emotions, with the ghosts of the life that had just ended. Olivia finally let out a long, shuddering breath, the kind that comes after the crying is done. She felt strangely empty, scoured clean by the ferocity of the afternoon. The pain was still there, a deep, aching wound, but the frantic panic had subsided, replaced by a stark, quiet reality. She walked over to her grandmother, who was now standing by the bay window, looking out at the manicured lawn. "You knew," Olivia said. It wasn't an accusation like Barbara's. It was a statement of fact, a dawning realization of the silent, protective watch her grandmother had kept over her. Carol turned to face her, her eyes soft, with a love that was as fierce as it was quiet. "I suspected," she corrected gently. "And I did what was necessary to protect you and your future, even from the man you chose to love. Sometimes, dear girl, the greatest act of love is preparing for the worst, even while you hope for the best." She reached out and placed her hand on Olivia's cheek. "Your grandfather built a life for us with his hands and his mind. He wanted to make sure his legacy would protect the women in his family, not be squandered by the foolishness of men. He would be so proud of the strength you showed today." Upstairs, they could hear the sound of drawers opening and closing, the muted thuds of Mark packing his bag. Each sound was a small death, the end of a shared joke, a memory, a future that would never be. Tears pricked at Olivia's eyes again, but these were different. They were tears of grief for what she had lost, but also tears of gratitude for what she still had, the unwavering love of her family. "What do I do now?" she whispered, the question aimed at her grandmother, at her mother, at the universe. Sophie squeezed her hand. "Now? Now we make tea. Then we pack up all this baby stuff, and we return anything that reminds you of him. And then we start over. One day at a time. We'll be here for all of them." An hour later, Mark came down the stairs, carrying a single suitcase. He looked smaller, diminished, the swagger and confidence stripped away, leaving only a hollow shell. He paused at the bottom of the stairs, looking at the 4 women who stood as a united front. His eyes sought out Olivia's one last time. "Liv," he began, his voice hoarse. She simply shook her head. There was nothing more to say. His time was up. He walked to the front door, opened it, and stepped out into the late afternoon sun, closing it softly behind him. The click of the lock sounded like the final word in a long, painful chapter. Olivia stood in the silence, her hand on her belly, feeling the strong, steady beat of her daughter's tiny kicks. The house was quiet. The storm had passed. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the beautiful oak floors. It was her house. It was her future. The storybook beginning had been a lie. But the story wasn't over. She and the little girl she carried would write the rest of it themselves. And it would be a story of truth, of resilience, and of the unbreakable strength of the women who had stood with her in the ruins and promised to help her rebuild. Olivia's story is a powerful and painful reminder that sometimes the people we trust the most are capable of the deepest betrayals. But it's also a story of incredible strength and the fierce, protective love of family that can rise up when we need it most. Grandma Carol didn't just expose a cheater. She armed her granddaughter with the truth and gave her back her life. It shows that resilience isn't about avoiding the storm, but about learning to stand firm until it passes and having the courage to rebuild on a stronger foundation. What do you think of Grandma Carol's actions? Was she right to prepare in secret, or should she have told Olivia sooner? We all have stories of betrayal and resilience, big or small. Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story moved you, please hit that like button. Share it with someone who might need to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories that explore the complexities of the human heart. Thank you for listening.